Hey, welcome to another session of Free and Clear. And I have with us such a special guest, one of our expert panelists. Her name is Kate Stoermer, and Kate Stoermer is the owner founder of the CEO Host. And you are going to absolutely love the information that Kate's going to share with us today. Welcome, Kate. So we're getting ready to go.
Awesome, John. Great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Kate, just to get us started, do you want to give us a little bit of background, maybe like, where you came from, what your mindset was looking like to make the transition that you did into, your own business and as your owner of the CEO Host and what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I did a very traditional, career in a sense toward, being in leadership positions and wound up as the executive director of a large nonprofit cancer research organization. And that was, supposed to be my dream job. And, it turned out it wasn't. and and at the same time, sort of throughout much of my life, I had always just been interested in real estate. And through a number of circumstances, I got introduced to this idea that I could build out a retirement through investing in real estate. And so I dove into that um, about 5 years ago. And I spent probably about 6 months really leaning in. And then this idea of short-term rentals came up. And so these are Airbnbs, right? And owning a second home that would pay for itself and put money in my pocket. And then beyond that, the idea that you could leverage short-term rentals to really move the needle on how soon I could retire. At that time, that was a super attractive proposition. And then as my journey grew and I got deeper and deeper into that, and in I had a mentor who once said, there's always a push and a pull when you make a job change. And in this instance, it wasn't just a job change; it was a life change, right? And so the lack of feeling that fulfillment and personal satisfaction in the day job, and the pull of having more time freedom to be present with my family, and the ability, the pathway that if I could put some work into it, I could actually achieve that, was really the pull that I was working towards. So my husband and I sat down and came up with a plan to have a financial safety net and to give me a runway, and it worked. So here I am 3 years after having quit my lucrative day job,
Yeah.
um, and now I'm a coach, consultant, and educator in the short-term rental space. And in addition to having my own portfolio and helping others do theirs, I also manage for a couple of other folks as well.
That is amazing, Kate. I got to share this with you and our viewers, listeners. When I've really taken the spiritual journey, and sometimes when I'm talking to people, their message hits in a way that sends, I call them goosebumps, up my arms and my legs. And there's stuff that you're saying throughout your message that I'm getting them. It's because I know that so many people inside of our program that your message is going to resonate with, that push and the pull, and the time frame of what it looked like, and you called it a runway to give yourself that space to get launched. No, that is awesome. Can you touch a little bit on what are some of the emotions you were going through? Because we attach our identity to that, that dream job that your family says, oh gosh, you'd be crazy to leave that and stuff. Like, what were some of the emotions that you maybe have struggled with when you were looking at that?
That's a great question, John, because I think it is such if you've worked, especially if you've had a W-2 job and you've never had your own business,
Yeah.
and you're in a circumstance where the people around you are all in that same space, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you walk in the room and you're like, yeah, I'm done working.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like have my own business and do this thing over here. Um, and for me, there was a level of uncertainty about how that would be received. Um, Most of my immediate family, and I'm very close to my family, most of them were like, well, what Kate wants to do, she's going to do, and she's always been that way. but at the same time, there was some folks recognized I'd been pretty unhappy in my job, and were not as surprised as I thought they might have been, right? But there is a lot of emotion and wondering how that's going to land, and I think it is a journey inside of us as well, to get to the place where we're willing to acknowledge within ourselves, and the next step being with the people in our lives.
Yeah.
And it was a hard conversation with my husband too, right? Like, I want to completely shift the dynamic in our family life, and it's a big risk,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, that is great. And now you'd mentioned like 5 years. So just I want to get a little more clarity around that for listeners, because a lot of folks are like, we're in a society today where it's like instant gratification, phone, like, hey, I want to quit my job today and be a bazillionaire tomorrow type thing, right? And I'm really realistic about this. Like, this isn't a get rich program. This is a life fulfillment program, there's everybody's going to be on a different journey. There may be somebody that pulls the rabbit out of the hat. Something happens for them in 30 days, but I like you said, the journey is a great definition. You hit it there. But what kind of window did you look at? Like when you were finally said, like, hey, I feel that pull. I got to do something from that time. Like what kind of, do you have some windows that you were willing to share?
So, prior to pulling the trigger and leaving my job, it was probably the last year when I really started thinking about, okay, what would this look like? And there were some reasons in our family life and stuff that it was apparent that my investment in my day job was, wearing on not just me, but like my ability to be present with the family. And, we still have kids, at home and all of that. And so I would say the last year I started asking myself, what would this look like? And it was that going from I'm going to move the needle on retirement to I actually want to see if I can have a different life, right? That's a big shift. And that shift happened probably in the last year. And then increasingly that opens the door to think and be around more entrepreneurial people and people who did that kind of thing and who left their W-2 and who were building a life for themselves where they had more control over how they spent their time and what they did with their time. And, when we're trading our money, and to be clear, like I am still trading my time for money, but I'm doing it in a way that feels more authentic to who I am now. Right.
Yeah. Love it. That is so important. That's one of my core tenets inside of it. Absolutely. Find out your free and clear calling, and then don't be afraid to lean in it and go to it. So okay, so then the question comes, like, why short-term rentals? Like what was it? You said, you've always felt this pull in the past. Was it something real that was like kind of like in the back, kind of whispering at you then that did that? Or maybe what was it that pushed you over the edge that said, okay, that is the vehicle that I want to use?
My husband and I used to joke in real estate, like I should get my real estate license because we've lived in the same house for 16 years. Like we're not moving. And yet I'm dragging him to open houses all the time. Right. And then, when I started when the door opened and the idea that short-term rental investing was actually something that I could do to leverage that interest in a positive way, that unlocked a whole other realm of possibility. And I think for many of us, it's the unlocking of potential that really, invites us to step through and to explore how life could look different.
Yeah.
And so that was, a big part of it. And then short-term rentals, initially, it really just was initially like I worked remote. My husband works remote. We could have a summer home and stay all summer at it when the kids aren't in school, right? Like that was the initial pull. Like this was a way to finance lifestyle.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
And then as I got more and more into the industry and began to build expertise, and I actually bought into a mentorship, and eventually actually became essentially as a side hustle, a coach in that mentorship program. So I was a paid coach for a high-end training program for short-term rentalists. So I just built expertise. And when you build expertise in something that you feel strongly about, right, it's very energizing, which was the opposite of what the day job had been. I had a lot of energy around short-term rentals and the expertise I had built. I would say at this point, I have come to realize that my true authentic self is I'm an educator and a coach, and I really like working with people and sharing my expertise. And in some ways, that has evolved into I do a lot of coaching for people who own businesses who are looking to scale. So now we're getting into the fact that I have an MBA and I have that. So it's a merging of that. But
Yep.
that again is another evolution that has come to be. So now it's not just teaching people about short-term rentals and helping people with short-term rentals, it's also helping people build businesses, right?
Wow. Yep.
Space.
Yep. That's fantastic. That is like, I love that. I love the fact that you're staying conscious to the fact that, hey, this is a journey and it's evolving as I go. So even though I love the short-term rental piece, now I'm seeing this open up because I feel like I like some of that stuff is in scripture too, where they talk about like the tenants, those that have and they do with it well, God gives us additional reward. So I love that kind of concept that you're talking about. That's great. So what kind of recommendations would you give to people that are having maybe some of those same feelings, the pull, the call, and all of a sudden they've seen the Airbnb, the Verbo stories. What are some recommendations you would give somebody that's thinking like, man, this could be an opportunity, like you said, not just to be an investment or retirement, but an actual building towards like this could be a lifestyle. This could change who I am. What the trajectory of my family's life, everything. What were some recommendations you'd give?
I, for my personal journey, I think it starts with just that awareness of interest, right? And whether it's short-term rentals or whether it's something else, when we shift our vision of what's possible,
Yep.
that's an invitation to begin to explore that and how that works for us. When people have landed on this idea of short-term rentals, whether it's, I can move the needle on retirement. I can use this as a way to offset my tax liabilities as a high net worth individual. Whatever that goal is, I always start, in my own work with folks. I always start with what is your goal? What are you
Yep.
trying to accomplish? Because
Yep.
everyone's different. Um, but that goal then needs to be informed. So it's always about just leaning in and getting informed and educated. And I think it's important to consider the source of information. And in today's day and age, there's so much information out there. And not all of it is great information. So understand where you're getting that information from and how does what that person success inform your own. Because when I first started out, I was just real estate investing, right? I actually started mentoring with somebody who did small multifamily. And it didn't take me long to go. And we're still friends to this day. Like I was like, David, like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't fun. This is work. You're cleaning toilets and you're like, no, 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 this is not like, and that was when I began to like look at other options. Because I spent the time to begin to learn and educate. And there's so much information out there that it's just important to look toward people whose success you want to emulate.
Yeah, yep. No, that's also great advice. One of the things that I'm thinking of that, and I don't know what triggered me to think this when you're just sharing, but one of the things that I share with folks in our program is risk. I talked about there being, in my mind, two different types of risk. There's a social emotional risk that really is within the confines of our own mind, and then there's the financial risk, which is obviously way more quantifiable, and typically we have the ability to better see that, and then how we deal with it comes back to the social emotional. On short-term rentals, what would you say like what are some of the common risks or even misconceptions of risk that may exist with your industry, and how you coach people through some of those concerns?
And I think it comes to many different. I think I see a lot of people who listen to messaging and marketing, right? Where we're all I mean, I understand a lot about marketing these days, and I can still get pulled in on marketing. But, for a long time, this idea that you could just get into short term rentals and mint money
Yeah. Yeah.
was this message. And I have met people who are like, I bought a place, they hadn't done the real work to understand the principles behind success
Yep.
in a way to be able to replicate them and make good decisions.
Yes.
And then, based on 6 hours of somebody's story, they went out and bought a short-term rental and it failed. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of risk in that, right? And so it's really important to understand, like, what are the drivers of success and what I'm trying to achieve, and then reverse engineer that,
Yeah.
right? In short-term rentals, a lot of it's how well marketed and positioned your offers. It's hospitality and marketing. This
Yeah.
isn't about a piece of real estate. It is about how well marketed that piece of real estate is in the listing platform, like Airbnb, like Vrbo. A lot of these markets have a lot of offers. So what drives a person to decide where they want to book? Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's really just understanding what are the drivers of success in this industry, and am I willing to put in the time to learn it? And what resources do I have to put toward it? And as you alluded to, how risk averse am I in
Yeah.
this scenario? Do I want an absolute sure thing? Or am I willing to, risk a little bit more in order to do a little bit more?
Yeah, I love it, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because this is something that I think about all the time when I'm talking with people. But when people have called me over my tenure and talk about real estate investments, regardless of what it might be, I always say that the biggest thing I learned from my experiences when I got into real estate investing was that you've got to treat it like a business. It's no different than any other business. There's economics of supply and demand. You've got your marketing, and you hit, like, I think, a core tenet for, so anybody that's listening or watching this, like Kate just shared, like, that's gold, is like, if you're going to do it, and do it treated, you got to treat it as a full-blown business with, what's market saturation, what's your messaging going to be, what's your unique selling proposition or value proposition that you're providing to the marketplace. So that was awesome. I love I love the fact that you brought that up. So
John,
that's a
there's
great.
no mistake that the reason my business is called the CEO Host is called that. Like it is all about the business principles, because it
Yeah.
is a business.
Yep.
And a lot of people seem to forget that, right? And so
Yeah.
there are factors that will influence your ability to be successful. You need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, any I try to keep it condensed to a shorter time frame so that people can keep their busy lives and stuff. So
Yeah.
as we're getting towards the end, Kate, is there anything that you see, like, hey, I like, this is a mistake that I learned from, in whether it is in the actual short-term rental business, or you're transitioning from the corporate world to your to entrepreneurship? Is there any mistakes or words of wisdom that you'd love to share with people?
Hey, mistakes are learning opportunities, right?
Yes.
Well, we can turn them into them unless we repeat them. But I think that for me, the biggest thing has been underestimating, I guess I would say, the emotional journey, and of leaving a career and the self identity tied to that, and
Yes.
shifting to being on your own and doing all of this on your own. And that is something I hear a lot of people talk about, that they had underestimated, is when you're in a corporate structure, you're segmented in what you have to do. And often when you're a founder of a business, regardless of what it is, now all of a sudden you're having to learn and build skills that you never envisioned having to do. And some of them you'll like better than others, right? And, having the recognition of that, and maybe figuring out how to outsource some of those things you don't like sooner, is something I wish I had maybe done.
That's a great piece of advice too. So yeah, trying to get those, stay in your zone, keep in your lane, what you do best, what you love to do, and then when I'll use your words, when you create enough runway and space for yourself, you get somebody on board to do the stuff that you don't like to do.
Right. Yep.
Style, right? And scalability, I'm sure. I bet that's one of the first things you talk about with your clients, is you want to scale and free up time. There you go.
Well, and I think that is, I just this morning actually was talking to a girlfriend who's in the industry as well, and we are at a point in life where scaling isn't the goal as much as, finding that balancing point of personal fulfillment and financial compensation and time freedom,
Yeah.
right? And, so somebody who's 20 is probably going to hustle a lot more
Yeah.
than somebody who's 50 with, a lot of family and other obligations, right?
Yeah, that in itself is another piece of gold. I hope everybody's listening. Kate's like sharing; she's dropping things that are like just like, yeah, that's definitely a highlighter right there in itself. Depending on where you're at in your life cycle and what your goals are, that can have a big impact on what that structure internally in your organization looks like as you're building it out. So, well, Kate, that is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing today. If anyone is interested in going deeper and exploring with you, what's the best way to contact you and get in touch?
Yeah. So I'm always, Kate at theceohost.com. You can find my website. You can find me on most social places as the CEO host, and, would love to connect.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate. We
Yeah.
appreciate it. Look forward to spending more time together with you.
Yeah. Thanks, John. This was real fun.
Thank you.